And then lastly, our fifth graders are going to have a presentation from Bailey Middle School coming up on the 9th. So representatives from Bailey come in and talk to our fifth graders about scheduling, things of that nature. They get the registration forms and the registration booklets at that time. So then they begin that registration process for middle school. I haven't gotten, one of the big questions that always comes up at this time of the year is, have you gotten feedback about anyone going to other schools, going to charters, things like that? Lake Norman has finished their lottery process, to my understanding. They typically are very forthright in giving us a list once they have it. They don't have it together yet, but once we have it, typically they'll send us one. We just call and ask. It's usually around 13 to 15 kids that I lose in fourth grade typically. Rarely is it a fifth grader, but it's usually fourth graders. I have had a few parents look into Davidson Day recently that I've had to fill out recommendations for, but for the most point, it's been kind of status quo in regard to that kind of movement, at least that I'm aware of. So I expect, between, if you talk about the whole school, 15 to 20 kids that typically will go somewhere else each and every year. So, and then some of those kids come back over time. So that I don't expect anything massive in regard to that. We have gotten some preliminary numbers that I'm obviously not allowed to share too much about right now, but I will share this, is that the predictions and the projections state that we will be bigger again next year, and that we will be adding in the ballpark of 80 students. So the expectation is that we'll be getting larger again. Now that's good in one way, because that means we aren't losing staff in regard to people that we have. So we typically have dodged the bullet in the past of reductions. So we aren't not typically losing teachers in the cuts because we continue to grow, but we will be getting larger, so which obviously becomes a space issue. And we're at the very early phases of that, but in the preliminary numbers we are getting larger. And the class that looks the largest right now is kindergarten. I projected in my mind 180. That's the number in my head that I go with, and right now we're up, again, it's a projection, so they have missed big time before, is 191 I think right now, which would mean I'd have to create another kindergarten class for next year, which would move us to 9.
And with teacher aides.
Yeah, and that's, and then and what Ms. Holman's saying is, and then we'll have less support. That is accurate. We'll go to 9. Now the only thing that is good by that, we may not lose as many, because the other thing that I didn't talk to you guys about this last time, but everything is based on formulas. So at one point we thought that assistants, well, up until this point, assistants were based on 1 assistant for every 31 students in K through 2. That's how we got our assistants, and we have 13. If things go the way it looks like it's heading, it will be based on just K numbers, but it won't be 1 to 31 anymore. It'll be 1 to 22, which is better. So instead of losing what I thought I was going to be losing, I may keep a few other people that I wasn't expecting, which is a good thing. So I'll have a little bit more help than I thought, but it's going to be relative. You have more kids, you keep a few extra people, you're still spreading yourself exceptionally thin. What that's going to look like, we just don't have a clue yet. How I'm going to manage that, I don't have an idea yet. We're at the real infancy of that process. I'll get feedback from teachers. I'll look and see how other schools are doing it. I'll do some research and see how it's been done in other places, and then we'll make a decision of how to take literally 6 or 7 assistants and try to use them effectively in a school of 1,000 children. Which is it's a difficult task, if you're trying to be fair, and I'm not sure that's going to be possible. What I've tried to do in the past is make sure every single grade level is getting support at different times during the day. I may have to be very strategic about how I'm using them because of the numbers that I have, but I'm just not sure exactly what that'll look like yet. So that's where we're at right now in regard to numbers and things of that nature. The numbers I have right now, or the projections I have right now, are worst case scenario. So I'm looking at the worst possible thing. So hopefully it'll be better than what I'm seeing. I don't think we're going to lose staff, beyond the assistant thing and the formula. and I have to decide about a support person, which I think I mentioned to you before. I haven't made that decision yet either. But beyond that, because we're growing, it's not going to be a situation where we're losing teachers. The other big thing I think I mentioned last time was class size. Our class sizes are large, so that's not going to be something you'll see as an impact. The state limits are the same, meaning that in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, I can only go to 24. And that's the way it's been for years. So right now, my classes in most grade levels are up near that anyway. So it's more of going to be about how I use people in the building. For instance, right now I use a teacher position, and this is maybe getting too complicated, but I use a teacher position to teach computer lab. Miss Lipsky is actually a classroom teacher, certified, even though she has all of her technology degrees and all that stuff. She actually is a classroom instructor. I use one of my, they call them allotments, and I use it to teach computer class. Some schools don't do that. Some schools use a, and I think we did mention this last time, they'll use an instructional assistant, or they call them a technology associate, and that's how they run their lab. Some schools have an open lab and teachers take them in. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but I may have to look at how I use the positions in my building. I had intensive reading class up through this year. A lot of schools don't do that. They do intensive reading on their grade level. So that's another position I may not be able to use for that specific thing. So that's the kind of thing I think how it'll impact us. It's going to be more about how I use the people in our building and less about losing people. I don't think that'll be the case. Questions about the budget or things of that nature? Yes?
I'm not sure if I understood. It was something you said at the beginning. So you might not have a say in who gets to stay and who doesn't, and the decision. Like it might not be based on merit and
Hopefully it will. What they decided last year was that it was based on performance, and then it was based on if there was a tie, seniority came into play. If you talk about assistants, it's a little bit easier. Assistants, when they get their evaluation, teacher assistants, they get number rankings. So Ms. Kabuka may be a 2.75 out of 3, which would put her as a above standard employee, but that she has a score. So those assistants actually are ranked based on my performance evaluations. And then if there's 2 people that have 2.75, they then look at seniority in those cases. That's how it's been done in the past. So now this year we don't know how it's going to be. We'll know some of that stuff on March 8th. They have to come back and redo the policy and approve how they're going to do it. So after the meeting on the 8th, we'll have a really good understanding of how that stuff's going to work. Teacher-wise, we went to a new evaluation this year. The evaluation is a rubric, and it's basically they're going to have to figure out, and I haven't seen this yet, but they're going to have to figure out how to give it points. And we haven't seen that yet, and it really takes away the goal of the new evaluation tool that we use with teachers is coaching. It's a coaching tool where you kind of find areas that they're proficient in, and then you want them to continue to work on, and then you can kind of move as they go, and it becomes a action document where as they get observed or evaluated during the year, it ebbs and flows based on what I see and what the information they share, evidences and things. Once you put an evaluatory number to it, it becomes much more difficult to make it a coaching tool, and it becomes more of an evaluation tool. So we don't know how that's going to work with teachers yet. The other dangerous thing that we have, I wouldn't say dangerous, but the other handcuff situation that I could find myself in because we're growing is that, like in the last 2 years, I've had less opportunity to hire my own people and interview my own people. Now, I've been lucky that some of the people that I've hired have been late in the summer after everybody's been placed, and I have been able to hire my own people. But there are other circumstances early on. If they know that I have 5 slots open, and they have to find slots for all these teachers that are from the schools that closed, as an example. If they have good performance, they have to find places for these teachers to go. I could easily be given teachers that have never met, never interviewed, don't know if they fit what I want the school to be, so on and so forth. That's a more dangerous thing to me because that could change the culture of your school. What we're planning on doing this year, if that happens, is going out to the school before the year ends, observing them ourselves, trying to get feedback and begin a relationship with them immediately versus waiting. What I've done in the past is I've met with them one-on-one in the summer and kind of had a mini interview, but it's after the fact. And I want to do that in advance this time. So hopefully we'll be able to be a little more proactive about that. But that to me is the more dangerous thing, because what ends up happening is sometimes you get people that don't want to be at your school because of your location, for instance. If the school's closing on the south side of Charlotte and you live in Rock Hill, and then you just get placed at JV Washam at Lake Norman, there's going to be some people that are not going to be real happy about having to travel that every single day. There's going to be some people that aren't going to fit into the culture of what you want your school to be. They may be very progressive or very traditional, and it just doesn't fit in with what you're doing. They may not fit with the team that you're trying to hire for. So that creates a chain. Oh, I thought you were going to talk. That creates a chain of events where I have to move people around to make sure teams mesh together. So it does create some complications that wouldn't exist if I was able to hire my own people. That concerns me a little more, but there's not much I can do about it right now. So I'm just it's more of a waiting game at this point. But yeah, performance will play a role with the assistants, but I just don't know how much yet. But March 8th, you'll know.